Greetings, students. Mr. Little here, and today we're going to talk about how to thesis, or how to write a thesis statement. This is the crux of your essay, your argument in a nutshell. So let's go over how you can write an awesome thesis statement. So first things first, as with every video in this series, we are using the 2019 AP World DBQ, that is the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean. We will also be using excerpts from graded student responses to help demonstrate the parts of the essay that qualified for points on the AP exam. And even if you're not an AP World History student, that's okay. DBQs are part of all AP Social Studies. If you're a student from AP US or AP European History, that's okay. This applies to you too. So if you want to follow along, go find the link to the DBQ. You can type in this address here, or you can access the slides below. And with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the thesis statement. So where does your thesis statement go? Well, in the general outline of the essay, as you can see here, your thesis statement goes at the very end of your first paragraph, following your contextualization, and is technically about 1 to 2 sentences long. I really would not recommend having more than 2 sentences. 2 at most, but 3 you're starting to get long, because remember, your thesis statement is your argument in brief. You're not making your entire argument. That's what your essay is for. You're just giving a roadmap, laying out what it is that you're going to do in your essay. So 2 sentences max is a really good idea at the end of your very first paragraph. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a good thesis. As I said before, the thesis is the last 1 to 2 sentences of your opening paragraph. And a thesis has to answer the prompt. I cannot stress this enough. This is a very common mistake that gets made, but students simply rephrase the prompt like a parrot, right? You're not a parrot. You don't rephrase the prompt, you answer the prompt. If you just take the words from the prompt and rearrange them, that's not going to count because you haven't made an argument. You just rearranged the words of the prompt. Remember when I talked about prepping for your DBQ, we talked about parsing the prompt. That is figuring out what the prompt is actually asking for, looking at the proper nouns and the verbs to find out exactly what you need to respond to. So use the parsing the prompt step to figure out what the prompt is asking and then respond to it. And you must make an argument. This again goes back to the repeating the prompt problem. If you just repeat the prompt, you're not making an argument. You're not a parrot. You don't repeat the prompt. It's fine, and it's even encouraged that you use the wording of the prompt, use the words and phrases from the prompt, but you must add an argument to it with an argument that is historically defensible. Now, what makes an argument historically defensible? You're making an argument about a historic event using evidence from history. And with the DBQ, lucky for you, you've got the evidence right there. So when writing a historically defensible thesis, as can be seen over here from this thesis tip, it's critical that you include at least one piece of specific evidence. Think about proper nouns, people, or events. And again, lucky for you, you've got all the evidence right here. You've got 7 documents that could potentially provide you with specific examples. In the planning video, we talked about using buckets. These are your topics. Each paragraph is going to be one bucket. And so a great way to think about your thesis is you've outlined how you're going to use each bucket. Simply take your buckets and describe how you're going to use them and what you're going to prove. Also, it's a great idea, in addition to using the wording of the prompt, to use historical thinking terms like change and continuity, cause and consequence, similarity and difference. Again, 3rd time's the charm. It is a-okay to reuse the words of the prompt, but you cannot simply repeat the prompt. The last thesis tip I would give you is simply this. While technically your thesis can be at the beginning or the end of your essay, I cannot stress enough that you want to put it at the very beginning, because this is where the readers are going to look for it. And it simply reads very nicely. If you put your thesis at the beginning, you know what to expect. Keep it easy, keep it straightforward, put it at the beginning of your essay. Let's talk a little bit about a formula. You're probably looking for a formula for how to write a thesis statement. And there is a very popular formula that's out there right now that I'll go over. And this is the popular formula. And it goes like this. Although X, for example, C, A and B, therefore Y, with A, B, and C representing your topics plus an example, Y and X demonstrating your historical thinking skills. This is a popular formula, and you can also invert it too. A and B led to Y despite C, therefore X. In all 3 cases, though, you're setting up what we might call a counter-argument, and that's why this formula is so popular. It sets up a counter-argument, and this can help you set up the complexity point later on, because part of making an essay complex is demonstrating a counter-argument. However, I work with students from a number of schools, and some of them have told me that this formula is actually really confusing, because if they don't know the DBQ topic that well, they're not really sure what to do for a counter-argument. They might freeze up, or they might take precious time trying to come up with a counter-argument, and that's really not what they need to do. It's also possible to simply have a more direct formula. So for example, during, as a result of topic of the essay, was X, for example, A and B, even though, despite, in addition to Y, such as C. So no need to present a counter argument. You're just going to go ahead and list your examples and your historical thinking skills. And it can just be as easy as topic of the essay was X, for example, A and B. I've seen a number of thesis statements that got the point for simply making an argument with literally no counter argument or attempt to show a different historical thinking skill. So while the counter argument formula is very popular, if you should get a DBQ where you really don't know what you're doing, it's okay to just be direct and say this historical thinking skill with these examples is perfectly acceptable because you're still laying out your argument. So I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and try this yourself. Pause the video and write a thesis statement. Here is the prompt. Pause the video, give it a try, and then come on back. So let's take a look at two thesis statements that both earned the point. These are actual student responses from the 2019 DBQ. I'm going to encourage you to try to spot the formulas we just talked about, the direct formula and the counter example formula in both of these examples. Take a second and pause the video if you need to read these or refer to the slides. And what I'm going to do is break these down right here. Well, the very first thesis statement is the more direct one. The Portuguese in particular transformed maritime trade in the Indian Ocean. This is demonstrating a causation thinking skill by taking control of the trade in Muslim and Hindu areas and by establishing a powerful empire for spices and raw materials. So here we have an argument that the Portuguese have transformed maritime trade in the Indian Ocean by doing A and B. And there's a specific example of A and B, that is Muslim and Hindu areas and spices. Therefore, we've laid out a historically defensible argument directly and clearly. Again, there's no counter argument here, so this may not be as effective for setting up complexity, but nonetheless, that is a thesis statement that earns the point. For the counter argument example, despite the personal loyalty between established merchants and empires making them deal unequally with the Portuguese traders, the Portuguese greatly transformed trade in the Indian Ocean, cause and consequence, by removing trade from the traditional Muslim merchants and by imparting trade regulations and restrictions on empires. We have three potential arguments: empires making them deal unequally with the Portuguese, removing Muslim merchants, and imparting trade restrictions on other empires. And so here we can see the counter example, right? Despite the loyalty of merchants and their empires. And so we can see there's the possibility of qualification and modification of the argument by talking about the personal loyalty of merchants. In short, either of these are perfectly acceptable thesis statements. Notice how they are both one sentence, although this one could, in theory, be two sentences. We want to keep it short and we want to respond to the prompt. They are using the wording of the prompt, transformed maritime trade, Indian Ocean, but they are adding to it by talking about Muslim and Hindu areas, by talking about spices and unequal dealings. So just keep in mind that when you write a thesis, you are responding to the prompt and making a historically defensible claim, and you can do that by using specific evidence. You can now write a thesis statement. If you still feel unsure about a thesis statement, keep practicing, but I want to thank you so much for joining me. My name is Mr. Little, and I'll see you next time.